it's always tough to take on a session after lunch, especially when the weather is nice outside. But we'll be trying our best. We've got a wonderful panel, an excellent panel on here to talk about this important issue. Mr. Chaturvedi was telling me earlier that these days, when people are invited to news channels, they're not allowed to speak. Every time there's a question, the nation wants to know. Well, today the nation, I guess, would not want to know because there are not too many cameras, but the enlightened audience, I guess, would like to participate as we speak. So what we are going to do is Mr. Chaturvedi, who is the member of Planning Commission, Government of India, he will lay out the theme for us. He'll speak, and followed by our speakers. I would like to introduce them. Mr. Gireesh Pradhan is the chairperson of Central Electricity Regulatory Commission. He's with us. Mr. S.K. Sarkar, Secretary Personnel, Department of Personnel, Training, Ministry of Personnel, Public Grievances and Pensions. But the reason he's here today is mainly because he was also the Secretary, Ministry of Water Resources, so his experience would be invaluable. We also have Mr. Amitabh Kant, CEO and Managing Director of Delhi-Mumbai Industrial Corridor Development. We've both worked together in the sense at the various ministries, even at the Tourism Ministry when he was there. I used to report, and sometimes he used to get miffed at me. Would you not agree with my report sometimes? Mr. Rajeev Kher, Secretary, Department of Commerce, Ministry of Commerce and Industry, India. He's got a tough task at hand right now. Mr. Surender Kumar, Secretary, Department of Science and Technology and Environment, Government of Tripura, India. So we'd also like to know from the states, as far as this important issue is concerned. So input from the states would be invaluable. Mr. Arunendra Kumar, Chairman, Railway Board, Ministry of Railways, India. And Ajai Malhotra, former ambassador of India to Russia. This may sound odd because he has a place here, because he's in the past been a part of many international environmental negotiations. So that is where he brings in his expertise. So without further ado, Mr. Chaturvedi, if you could start.
Let me start, first of all, of the three issues of energy, water and food. Let me start with energy first and lay out some issues in the field of energy and energy security. First, it's a question of energy access. Today in India, while we have energy access in the rural areas to the extent of 55% or 65%, depending on which source of data you use, but definitely a large number of people, around estimated is around 300 million people don't have access to electricity. This is a huge number, and energy security can have no meaning. Similarly, about 80% of them cook through biomass, and they don't have access to clean fuel. Energy security would have no meaning unless we are able to bring them within the fold. Second, our energy requirements of the economy. Our India is a growing economy. Our per dollar income is around $1,500. So in case we are to move forward and we are to bring our incomes to a middle level income country, somewhere around $8,000 or $6,000 to $8,000 or $10,000, somewhere around that, then our energy requirements will grow. Estimate is that it will grow at the rate of around 5% as far as commercial energy is concerned, between 5% to 6%. So from the current levels we are expecting somewhere around 550 million tons oil equivalent. It will go, and it will go almost 2.5 times. Now this will mean that our oil imports, which are at this moment large, will become as much as 90% of our requirements. It will mean that our gas imports will be almost 50% of our requirement. And it will mean that our coal imports will be somewhere around 35% of our requirements by around 2030. And we'll be importing somewhere around 45% of our requirements. Now, this is a scary thought. So in case this situation is to be rectified, we have to move forward in one manner. A, we must improve our energy availability from the domestic market, And the maximum of all, we must expand renewable energy. We must expand the solar energy. We must expand the wind energy. Water and food are correlated strongly with energy. If energy is used efficiently, then we find that there is a gross misuse of water, people taking out water if energy is provided freely. So it's important. And India is not a water surplus, huge surplus country. So we have to improve our water resources. According to the plan, it is important that we meet the requirements for our nation. In none of the major capital towns, we are able to meet the requirements of our water. And thirdly, food. Food is integrated with the other two. In case we have adequate water, adequate energy, then food production will go up. I think it's important that we handle these three issues in an integrated manner, both on some of the issues which I have mentioned and some of the issues related to between center and states, because responsibility is on both. I think in case we do that, then we can move forward and we can have some sort of energy security and a sustainability of development.
Right. Now what we'll do is we'll have each speaker speak for about 3 minutes, after which I'll open the session up for question and answers. So would like you to, raise your hand, introduce yourself. But first, Mr. Amitabh, Kant.
Yeah, thanks, Kumar. To my mind, the biggest challenge India faces on sustainability is the challenge of urbanization. Because if 350 million Indians are going to get into the process of urbanization in the next 2 decades, and another additional 700 million as per the McKinsey study by 2050, I think we must understand that cities occupy just 3% of the land mass, but they are responsible for 2/3 of the greenhouse gas emission. So one of the key challenges for India is how do we create sustainable smart cities of the future? And one of the key projects is this dedicated freight corridor which will link up Delhi to Mumbai. At present, all goods travel by lorries, and it takes about 13 to 14 days to reach the ports on the west coast of India. But by 2017 end, the DFC will put all goods, this is a new train which will run between Delhi and Mumbai, and put all goods within 14 hours. So from 13 to 14 days to 14 hours by train, only containerized train, this will be a revolutionary shift. One of the most ambitious projects of Government of India is to create 7 new cities on either side of this corridor, 7 new greenfield cities. And these are very large cities. This is actually the biggest urbanization project, and the key driver of this will be manufacturing. So I think this is a huge opportunity for India to plan cities which use technology to leapfrog. Now, when cities were made across Europe and America, land, gas, and water were all cheaply available. These are extremely scarce commodities today. So Americans made sprawling cities. They made cities like Atlanta, where 98% of the people travel by car, and therefore the ecological footprint is 12 times more than another city of the similar size like Barcelona. Now, India has the opportunity. Urbanization has ended in Europe, it's ended in America, it's just begun in India. And actually, India will urbanize in the next 4 decades in a very big way. It'll do more construction than what it has done in the last 500 years. But it has a huge opportunity to set a model for the rest of the world, to create sustainable cities. And when I talk about sustainable, I talk about basically 2 things, that cities must be embedded on the back of public transportation system. If the cities are driven, if 65 to 70% of the people use mass transportation systems, and if another 15 to 16% people either cycle or walk, you've created sustainable cities of the future. The second key aspect is, how do you use technology to leapfrog? And I think we have this opportunity, what is increasingly being talked about as smart cities of the future, or smart and intelligent cities of the future. It's important to converge next generation technology and converge so that you can manage an entire city on a central command room. Digital technology enables you together today to manage your electricity, your power grid, your water, your transport system, and spread education, health, etc. from a digital control engineering viewpoint. And therefore, India has this opportunity to create next generation sustainable cities of the future.
But I I guess cycling would not be possible, isn't it? Because
Why not?
in Delhi, I cycle every day, and I wouldn't want my friends to cycle on the streets of Delhi. So we leave that out for now. It is from the cities.
No, I think there's a huge possibility as long as the planning process, the key is the kind of planning you do for a city.
Right.
And since you're getting into new urbanization, you can plan cities which have cycling as a very integral component.
Certainly, sir. Thank you for that. Now, Mr. Rajeev K.
Well, let me approach the subject from a slightly different perspective. You know, I am at present positioned in the Ministry of Commerce. Now, very often, environmental sustainability particularly has been taken as the other side of coin. And very often in international construct, in the manner in which we interact with each other, it is very often that the developed countries have tried to use environmental sustainability arguments as non-trade supporting arguments. And this is precisely the big challenge that we have to meet. While on the one hand, there is a strong commitment to sustainability of development process within the country, on the other hand, there is a big challenge of being able to contribute to that domestic sustainability and yet not be seen as a country which is not supporting supposedly environmentally sustainable proposals and moves that are made by international community. Now, I would refer you to the recent discussions in the Bali ministerial meeting, which referred to the trade and food security dimension, the connect between trade and food security. The issue under food security debate was to what extent India's public stock holdings, which are based upon a minimum support price system, and to what extent are these sustainable for international trade and they don't distort the international trade. The debate essentially was driven by individual interests of the countries which were participating in this process, and it was quite visible that many developing countries, many least developed countries were entirely off the mark when they were expected to recognize what is the impact of this debate on their own development. So what really came out of this process was that there was very little understanding and information in the least developed countries on actually being able to make assessment of the interests that are affected by various international moves. Food security is one area. Now let's look at the energy security. Now in energy security, there are whole kinds of dimensions that have been thrown at the international discussions, particularly in the World Trade Organization, in several other organizations, for example, the Indian International Standards Organization. There has been a talk of carbon footprinting. Now, those who would look at environmental sustainability from a pure perspective of energy and environment footprinting would definitely value this. But just try to look at how this will adversely affect in a small country or in a developing country, small manufacturers, who don't have access to technologies which are environmentally superior technologies, and how that would affect the livelihood and the development pathway of these small countries. So there has been a continuous debate on whether this carbon footprinting needs to be adopted for trade purposes or not. And India's position has always been that for trade purposes, carbon footprinting should not be used. So the point I am making here is that there are two sides to this debate on sustainability and food and energy and water security. And we will have to look at this whole thing in a composite manner. Thank you.
Right. Now let's get a view from the states. Mr. Surender Kumar, Secretary, Department of Science and Technology and Environment, Government of Tripura.
Thank you. Since I am working in the state of Tripura, I would like to give a perspective from the northeastern region. Northeastern region, it basically comprises 8 states, which include an area about 8%, 8% of the geographical area, about 4% of the population of the country. If we consider water, energy, and food, northeastern region has very striking issues. Water, if we take water, northeastern region gets about 250 centimeters of rainfall every year. It varies, it can go up to, in certain regions of Meghalaya, it can go up to more than 1,000 centimeters in Cherrapunji and some other adjoining regions. And about 1/3 of the total water availability, surface water availability of the country, it is in the northeastern region itself. And if we take if we take energy, the hydroelectric potential of the northeastern region is about 40% of the total hydroelectric potential of the country, which is about 60,000 megawatts. But in both these cases, water potential as well as hydroelectric potential, very little of this potential has actually been harnessed. It may be about 5% or so. And if we look at the energy consumption in the Northeast, per capita energy consumption in the Northeast is much less than the per capita energy consumption in the country, the average per capita consumption in the country. It is in fact, leave aside Sikkim, the other states, the per capita consumption is about 200 kilowatt hour per year in comparison to about 800 kilowatt per hour per year in the rest of the country. And both these things, energy, water, both these are related to food production also. Since water is not being properly harnessed, it's not available for irrigation, despite having so much of water, still most of the farming is rain-fed, and that leads to low productivity of most of the areas, particularly uplands. Excepting valleys, the agriculture productivity in the northeast region is extremely low. So all these issues have to be addressed, and of course there is a Ministry of Northeastern Region which is looking after the infrastructure needs of the northeastern region. There is a Northeastern Council, which is basically a planning and coordination body, which is looking into issues relating to planning and coordination. All the issues of energy, water, food security, all these issues have to be addressed in a manner so that both security as well as sustainability are ensured. And if you look, for instance, if you look towards these issues, and if you look at other things which are related to sustainability, like forest area in the northeastern region is more than 50% of the total geographical area. And it is about 1/4 of the total forest area of the country. Northeastern region it is one of the 2 mega biodiversity regions of the country also. And if naturally, for any development activity to be taken up, this forest area has to be diverted. Whether we want to take up the exploitation, harnessing of hydroelectric potential, whether it is construction of roads, other infrastructure, the forest area has to be diverted. So it is to be done in a very scientific, in a very sustainable manner. Infrastructure cannot be ignored. There is a huge infrastructure deficit in the northeastern region. That deficit has to be bridged so that people can enjoy, people can benefit from the huge amount of other natural resources that are available in the northeastern region. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Now, Mr. Arunendra Kumar, Chairman, Railway Board.
Good afternoon. We in Indian Railways have 2 basic challenges when we come on this subject, that's energy and water conservation. Let me just introduce how much does it cost to transport 1 ton on rail. Our expense is 1.37 rupee per ton kilometer. And this is what we have to focus to reduce. And what we have is traction, both electric and diesel. And the total Indian Railways budget is 1,40,000 crores, and we spend about 25,000 crores on traction, both diesel and electric. Our efforts and challenges to how to contain this, whereas 1,40,000 keeps on growing, but the fuel component keeps on remaining static or even becoming more efficient. So in both modes of traction, whether it's diesel or electric, the challenges are just too many, and we have been meeting that in many ways. And one was suggested just now, that we have a dedicated freight corridor, because we run passenger trains and the freight trains on the same track. And the requirements for both are different. And if that has to be achieved, then we decided to go separate, at least for the major route, that is the coal carrying route and the container carrying route, the eastern and the western, and to have a separate dedicated freight corridor with guaranteed transport timings. This is December 17 is the date that we will see this through. And by that time, we will have even more advancement in the traction technologies, because we will running much more longer trains, much more heavier trains. Mr. Sriprakash knows it pretty well. He has been piloting this when he was in the Infra Directorate. And this is the vision that we seek to have. The second part is how do we improve the diesel technology so that the diesel consumption goes down. We have had higher horsepower locomotives. We now have better diesel injection systems on the locomotives. And the latest innovation that we have tried is to bring in gas through the medium of gas turbines and to change the existing diesel locomotives with gas-based like we have done for the cars and automobiles. So same kind of arrangement we have done for one train in Delhi. It's not yet doing so well as we wanted it to do, but the train with gas is still on, and one train with 7 coaches is running as a commuter train in Delhi area on gas-based systems. The long-range travel on gas is being experimented with the assistance of Canadian companies and Russians, and that project is very much on to decide how to carry gas-based locomotives for such a long distance. We have to carry gas on the train itself to begin with. So on the electric side, the locomotives have been provided with we try to use that energy which goes as a waste in the braking systems. We bring it back to the system through the wires, and the same braking motor becomes a generator and generates electricity which we feed back into the wires. That is on the generation part, but how to use energy more efficiently, that we have gone, and now we are trying to experiment with the concept of power trading, in the sense that we buy power at a time when it is easy to get and at a cheaper price to reduce the overall energy impact to the nation. Railways is very energy efficient, that's nothing new to say. Indian Railways touches the hearts and lives of everyone, that is nothing new to say. So that is the thing which we have to concentrate and reduce as much as we can through technological inputs. Coming to water, Indian Railways is very heavily water intensive because of our style of living, and we tend to clean coaches, wash coaches not quite frequently. So we have gone for a design which is a bio-toilet design in which you don't have a discharge, and it is a pure Indian design, not like the aircraft toilets where you do vacuum toilets or things of that type. It is a discharge-free design of a toilet, lifelong by a bacteria, which is once fed, and the cost is hardly anything. For one toilet, it costs 100 rupees for a lifetime, and that thing, all the defecation will not be taken out, no smell, and that trial has started. We have got about 7,000 toilets running on the Indian Railways. This will make our tracks clean. The washing at the platforms will be not required. So to that extent, water conservation will happen, and the platforms will be as good as we see them abroad. So these initiatives that we have done, they are all based, we are trying to indigenize, innovate in our own way so that whatever we come out of these things are usable at the grassroots level at low cost. Thank you very much.
So I'm sure there'll be many questions on that. Our next speaker, Mr. Ajai Malhotra, former ambassador of India to Russia.
Thank you. I'll just give it a slight international twist before I come back to the topic under discussion. I think we must recognize that when we have international environmental negotiations, they are about how to share the costs and benefits of environmental protection. And for developing countries like India, and in fact for the rest of the developing world, for us, poverty eradication is the primary and overriding priority. That having been said, it does not mean that we shall not participate or not support such international efforts. It is in our interest to do so. It is in our interest to improve the situation for our own people and to do that in the most efficient possible way. Equally, we cannot take on legally binding obligations unless we know where the funds and where the technology is going to come from, because technology can be costly unless made available at special and preferential rates. And funding, unless it's new and additional, as we have traditionally argued, is really not of much benefit if you just diverted it from other funding sources and we get a legal obligation. That having been said, I would like to make one or two minor comments to make this a bit of a discussion. I enjoyed the very short presentation by Amitabh, where he spoke about the Delhi-Mumbai industrial corridor. And I would like to add that it's important that we have cities which are also healthy, which are also livable, and not merely efficient, not merely green. And I say that because having recently shifted to a place like Gurgaon, I see that by 9 o'clock, everyone gets into their flat or house, shuts the door, and that's it. But if you had better lighting using solar energy, for example, if you use cycling, and I'm a strong supporter of cycling, I think we are making an error if you're only going through mass transportation. You need both. Traditionally, India has been a country which was famous for its large number of cycles. Now, yeah, and walking. These are good for health also. And you see this happening now in the West. They're doing separation of waste. You take your bottles up there, your paper up here, and you do things like that. In India, we do it traditionally. You try putting a box for bottles of water. 99% of Indians separate it in advance and give it to the kabadiwala for disposal in any case. Similarly, up here, we shouldn't lose this opportunity to make our cities livable and healthy. I think that's hugely important. I also wanted to comment on what Commerce Secretary Mr. Kher said. You know, when we talk of food subsidies, we cannot forget that developed countries give huge subsidies which are not efficient for food. 2 years ago, the developed world was giving something like $415 billion plus. And it is, I would say, almost mischievous to say that you can subsidize food where rich are concerned, but you cannot do it for the poor, who probably need it more. And finally, I want to make a comment on what Mr. Surender Kumar said. Certainly, we need to follow best practices. When we look at water, energy, and food security, in India's case, we are vulnerable on energy, we are vulnerable on water, we are secure on food in the sense that we have enough food grain production. But there is still one other thing that's coming up, which is the Jawaharlal Nehru National Urban Renewal Mission. I hope that gets extended because through that we can help provide better basic services to the urban poor. And as pointed out, the urban poor are growing in number and urban sprawl is increasing. And finally, my last point, in looking at the international negotiations, we have the MDG goals coming up for review, 2015. One of them certainly is the 7th MDG goal, and MDG 7C relates to water. I do hope that we will try and set new standards for ourselves. That standard was to get at least 50% of population in each country to have access to drinkable, potable water, and for other purposes. I do hope that even though we are a developing country and not well off, we will try and place the bar a little higher so that we strive a little harder to achieve those goals. Thank you.
It'll certainly be a challenge. Yeah. Thank you for that, sir. Now, our next speaker, Dr. S.K. Sarkar, Secretary Personnel, Department of Personnel and Training.
Thank you. In India, if you look at the availability of water, roughly 1/3 is the annual utilizable water resources, because roughly 4,000 billion cubic meter of water we get through rainfall, and that also includes the snowfall. And out of this 1,100 BCM of the total utilizable water, we have roughly 70% are on the surface water and the remaining on the groundwater level. The estimate shows that by 2020, India will be a water stressed country, and by 2050, it will be a water scarce country. So there is a need for augmenting the water supply on the one side of the spectrum. Who uses this kind of water? Roughly, the 80% of the water is used by the irrigation side, and roughly 7 to 8% on the energy sector, and around 10% in the drinking water sector. So the water supply is mostly consumed on the demand side in the irrigation. So when you are talking about the sustainability, one has to look on the demand side of the spectrum in the water sector. If you look at the demand side, the efficiency on the demand side in these four or five sectors like irrigation, industry, drinking water, energy sector, there is a need for rethinking and also need much improvement. The Government of India has constituted the National Water Mission as a part of the follow-up of the fourth report of the IPCC on the climate change, and one of the component of the mission is the increasing the 20% water use efficiency in the water sector. So it is a huge formidable task, because India, the water is a state subject, because those who are associated, who are familiar with the constitutional scheme, water is a state subject and central government has a facilitating role, because many of the schemes and the water sector activities are taken by the state governments. So the challenge is before us, how to introduce a kind of a incentivization method, so that the states are, they take up schemes which are efficient schemes. Because if you look at the dams, we have around 5,000 dams all over India, and most of the dams are very quite old dams. You know? The improving the efficiency is very important component of the activities. So on the one hand, the demand side efficiency improvement is extremely essential. On the other side, also on the supply side efficiency is extremely essential. Second factor the challenge before us is that the Planning Commission has been consistently coming out with the idea of a need for a multidisciplinary approach in the water sector. Because till now in the water sector, our solution is mostly on the engineering solution. You build a dam, you just look from the engineering point of view. But now the time has come, one has to look from the point of view of the stakeholders. We have in India around 63,000 water user association, where the pricing concept is coming up. Because after all, to introduce efficiency, you have to introduce the pricing mechanism also in the system. Our water policy of 2012 is talking about the pricing issues also. They are talking about the issue of how to improve the efficiencies. So the challenges before us is to how to coordinate between various segments of the water users as a sectors, how to coordinate with the states and the center, and how to introduce a scheme where everybody is incentivized to improve the sector through various reform related measures. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Final speaker, after which we'll open up for questions, Mr. Gireesh Pradhan, Chairperson of the Central Electricity Regulatory Commission, issue that is center stage just now in Delhi Power.
Well, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you. Yes, electricity is very much the central subject in Delhi today. But I'll just step back and go back to what Mr. Chaturvedi mentioned right in his opening remarks in terms of energy security being the crucial factor as far as India is concerned. I just want to begin with, just mention something which knits everything sort of together in terms of the energy security, energy, water, and food security. You know, northern Bihar has been known for poor services in terms of water as well as electricity. It's a very rich soil there, but they don't have water. Now, recently, there has been a number of experiments there. In fact, it's past the stage of experiments, where solar pumps of the capacity of almost 7 horsepower have been used because the water table there is quite high. It's easy to pump out this water and improve on agriculture productivity because you take a second crop. Now that has changed quite a large part of some of the areas that I've seen. Now this knits together, I think, very nicely the importance of the renewable energy sources as well as the need for providing energy for irrigation and better agriculture productivity leading to food security. Friends, there's no denying the fact that we in India are at a very low level of electricity consumption. Our friend here mentioned about the difference between Northeast and the average and India. I'd just like to mention, I take that argument further with around 800, 830 kilowatts per capita consumption of electricity, where the world average is 2,800. So, that sort of puts in place where we stand. And in that context, let me just mention that the role of renewable energy is extremely vital in terms of access to energy, which Mr. Chaturvedi mentioned is not there for almost 40% of the population. And number two, in terms of sustainable growth. So I would strongly urge, and this is something that the regulators now are looking at very seriously. Just to mention something which is embedded in the Electricity Act, which is the renewable purchase obligation. We find that the regulators are now taking the renewable purchase obligation very seriously. In fact, let me mention that in January, one of the state regulators passed a historical order where he has fined the managing director personally of the DISCOM for not fulfilling their renewable purchase obligation. So this, I think, is where the regulators are going to play a very vital and very important developmental role, as we ourselves have charted a sustainable route for further development. And that's, I think, one of the basic factors which is going to change over the next couple of years, the way we are looking at energy for growth. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. We open it up for questions. We just have time for 2 questions. We'll start with, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, Joydeep Gupta, I'm a journalist with the thirdpole.net. My question, I have a specific question for Mr. Kant. These new cities coming up in the corridor, what are the specific economic incentives you are planning to provide, if any, for sustainability, specifically something like rooftop solar or bus corridors? Can you explain, please?
See, these, to my mind, it's not the incentives which drive sustainability. To my mind, sustainability is a function of good planning. And I mentioned 2 aspects of that. If you get your planning wrong, and if you create a city like Atlanta, your ecological footprints will be very high. The key is good planning. The key is public transportation. The key is good technology. And this is a project which is based on creation of infrastructure ahead of demand. It's not based on incentives. Many of these incentives flow from the national manufacturing policy. But I think we've reached the stage of our growth. India has reached the stage of its growth where it must create the most sustainable cities of the world. And this is about infrastructure creation and good planning, not about incentives.
Right. Ma'am, yeah.
Thank you very much. 3 quick fire questions, if you'll allow me. One is to Mr. Pradhan. Role of the Forum of Regulators in using electricity as a means of overall development, including the food, energy, water nexus. I mean, your views on that. One is to Dr. Sarkar, which is to look at how can we promote interagency coordination, what incentive mechanisms can possibly be put in place, and if possible for Mr. Chaturvedi, we continue to grow some crops that are not suitable to soil types with big implications for water and energy. How can we ensure that this kind of consistency emerges in our policy frameworks? Thank you.
Well, as far as the Forum of Regulators is concerned, it's a body set up under the Act. It's a conglomeration of all the state regulators with the central regulator as the chairperson. It has no statutory powers, and it has no laid down functions. It acts to harmonize regulations across the country. We do produce, however, a lot of model regulations, and we do debate and try and convince each other about the direction that regulators need to take. Many of the important elements that are fed into the government's perspective as well as policy perspectives stem out of the deliberations of the Forum of Regulators. So we've been able to achieve quite a bit through a consensus and through a convincing approach. Obviously, it doesn't have any mandatory standing or a mandatory ruling.
I think on the subject of interagency coordination, as I mentioned earlier, that water is a sector where the subject is implemented in the states because water is a state subject. Similarly, at the federal level, the water resources is being managed by different ministries. For example, your drinking water ministry, then energy ministry, renewable, there are so many other ministries, agriculture. So in the relationship between the federal and the state, to incentivize the state to undertake reforms in the water sector, the Government of India has a scheme of reforms link grants kind of a scheme. The Planning Commission has in the process of formulating and finalizing the scheme. So probably that will help the states to also undertake reforms, which includes the various aspects like pricing, like your efficiency improvement, etc., etc. Second thing is that another kind of incentive one can have, using this water users association, which particularly in the agricultural sector, I think we have. Because there, if you improve the efficiency by a certain percentage, I think one can roll back the collection to those associations. It is happening in many parts of India where water user associations are given incentive for improving the efficiency. So I think it is a combination of various schemes which can constitute the incentivization in the water sector. So it is possible.
On the question of misuse or for in the case of food crops, I think one policy measure which is required is this policy of free energy for agriculture, which is taking away all the rice for rice. Water is being taken away in Punjab, downstream. It's going grey and grey and grey. So this policy of free power must go, and in case it goes, then certainly they will be taking up other crops. You can, if the state government wishes, provide support, but then it's for other crops, not then and then alone. Otherwise, what's happening is that free power is first of all taking away. Second, whether you want to charge them or not, but at least meter them. Just now, I think the states are extremely reluctant to meter even all the agriculturists, which is a very, very difficult thing with a political consensus. I think we will have to build a political consensus on that. And third, I think we will need greater investments in other infrastructure for water saving equipment so that we can use all those water saving technologies like being used in many of the other countries of the world, like Israel, and in many parts of Maharashtra, like many parts of in Punjab, where they are using all these technologies to save water. In case we do, then I think there will be some possibility of saving on some of these food crops.
Right, and of course.
Yeah, this is V.K. Srivastava, PCRA, Ministry of Petroleum. We are talking of energy, food, water triangle for the last 3 days. My question is how balanced this triangle is at the moment, and second is, are our actions are directed towards this? The question is quite general, but I'll like to it to be answered by Mr. V.K. Chaturvedi, as he's one of the most enlightened person in this field.
Well, since you are discussing it for 3 days, I'm sure that you must have got some answers. But As for today, I can say that in all these three areas, today one of the most important thing, in my opinion, is efficiency use, whether it is electricity, whether it is water, I think it is most important, and whether it is oil and gas. This is the most critical thing, use of efficiency, and second, use of renewable energy. In case we are able to save on oil, and third, I must say, abolishing subsidies, oil subsidies. Oil subsidies today are around 1.4 lakh crores, $6 billion. Now, $6 billion of the oil subsidies, you can provide free education, free food for your children and all that. So these subsidies, in case they go, then I think we would have greater energy efficiency, we will have better usage of oil, and a much more integrated view of these three sectors.
Right. Thank you, sir. I'm afraid we've run completely out of time now for any more questions, so we come to the end of this session. But, you know, we've got our top bureaucrats here. Mr. Chaturvedi talked about political consensus. I guess political consensus is so important because going forward, the way we are looking at the economy is that there'll be more and more powerful, small state, regional parties who will have a say at the center. So to convince them to have a central government and a state government partnership and to have all these programs implemented in the right way, meaningfully across the country will be our biggest challenge here in India. With that, we come to the end of this session. I would like to thank my panelists. Thank you so much.